we have now recognized that the brain is anything but a stable, hardwired structure. When I went through my series of lectures on neurophysiology, we were taught that there were certain regions of the brain that responded to the hand and other regions to the lips and the visual cortex, and that was it. There was no variation or negligible variation over life. It was fixed after birth, shortly after birth, or just prior to birth. What we've now recognized is the capacity of the brain to change its microstructure, especially known as neuroplasticity, seems to exist throughout life in varying levels in different regions of the brain. Now, neuroplasticity is the phenomenon that has made not just humanity possible, but all learning and memory possible. Because what is a memory? A memory is information stored in the brain in some stable fashion over a long period of time. And we know from other experiments that it is stored in some way in the changes in the structure of the strength of the communication between nerve cells, the synapses. Now, the ability of the brain to change the strength of these synapses is the way that information is stored and held in the brain. And the ability to change is neuroplasticity. If the brain couldn't change, if these changes couldn't take place as a result of experience, learning is impossible. Memory is impossible, and memory makes learning possible. So the factors that influence neuroplasticity in different regions of the brain have dramatically different levels of neuroplasticity. The highest level of neuroplasticity is in a region of the brain known as the hippocampus, which is in the temporal lobes, deep within the temporal lobes. That has the highest level of neuroplasticity, and when something is first experienced, the memory is first stored in the hippocampus. And it's stored there just as essentially as a result of a single experience, but it can't stay there, because if it stays there, it eventually is overwritten by more recent experiences, because the price that you pay for having such high neuroplasticity is that things aren't stable. So what the brain has to do is to somehow take that information and over a period of 7 to 10 days, store it elsewhere where it's more stable. And that reorganization of the memories and restoring it in association with other memories that are similar to it or related to it by your brain, takes place at night time, during sleep, during dreaming and during the non-dreaming phase. So what that also presupposes is that many other regions of the brain also have to demonstrate this neuroplasticity, not just at night time, but also during the day as well, because we now recognize that things like training, learning a new skill, a motor skill, but other sorts of skills, literally changes the way the wiring is organized within the brain. We know that if, for example, the ability to differentiate different textures by one region of the finger, the area that that fingertip has or is represented in the cortex grows if you're putting more emphasis there. The ability to differentiate two sounds, two phonemes, for example, the better your ability to differentiate them, the further apart they are on the cortex, the more difficult it is for you to differentiate two sounds, the more they overlap on the cortex. A nice little example is the R and the L, R and L sounds in Japan. In Japan, the phoneme, the ul sound, doesn't exist. The R does. And so what happens is, after birth, the neural networks that respond to the L sound are not expressed because they're not exposed to that particular environment. The R is. And so what happens is that there is this, when the R sound and the L sound is sounded, there's an enormous overlap. What we've learnt, some groups in the United States have found, is that by training, these regions can actually separate so that people can differentiate the two. And this is being used in aspects of remediation for reading disorders. The issue that is probably most important is these neuromodulators that are influenced in neurotherapy also influence the tendency for cells to express neuroplasticity. Certain neuromodulators, such as acetylcholine, noradrenaline, and we think others as well, dopamine, and possibly serotonin, but particularly dopamine, acetylcholine, and noradrenaline, increase neuroplasticity. Now, what's interesting here is that the level of those neuromodulators is strongly influenced by the psychological state of the individual.